Nick Ducoff joins us today. He's the head of institutional growth at the Solana Foundation. We'll be talking about the future of Solana. Welcome to the show, Nick. I'm David Lin.
I'm Bonnie. First question, I want to talk about Solana, of course. You guys successfully caught the AI narrative, the DePIN narrative, and Memecoin narrative. Before I ask you about what is next, I want to get your comments on all these different narratives. So AI, is it still alive?
AI is absolutely alive. And I think there's two things to think about when you think about AI. One is it cool? And two is it useful? And a great example of it being cool and useful in the context of institutional use cases, we're here at DAS in New York City, is, for example, Drift, which is a perps protocol on Solana, has an AI collateral management feature, which allows you to, in your sleep, maintain your collateral such that you don't get liquidated in the event that things are going the other direction.
That's very useful, right?
Yeah.
What about DePIN? Because DePIN was super popular 2024, but coming into 2025, I don't really hear people talking about it anymore.
You know, I just last night at dinner, a friend, Blue from T. Rowe Price, was saying that she switched her phone to Helium, and she's only Helium, and a big fan of it. And I think examples like that, which are truly democratizing access to, self-service, are great examples of DePIN, and I think that narrative will continue to be strong.
The interesting thing is she sat there and she talked about DePIN exactly the same way she said.
Love it.
Yeah, like she really loved DePIN. What about meme coins? Oh, everybody's talking about Solana meme coins. All the celebrities are launching on Solana. Why?
Well, Solana is the fastest, cheapest blockchain in the world. It's the most used blockchain in the world. There's nearly 100 million transactions a day on Solana, over $10 billion a day of on-chain trading activity, 6 million daily active users on the network. And so if you think about it, with any consumer product, where do you want to be? You want to be where the people are, and the people are on Solana.
But is that useful for people? Like, is that a technology people actually need?
Well, I think, it's a primitive, and we always are building on prior art, and meme coins proved that you can do token launches at scale on the Solana network, and the network can handle that. A great example, in January, there was a meme coin that launched that drove quite a lot of activity on the blockchain, and it stood up great, and something like 4 or 5 billion of stablecoin flowed into the network, and there was something like 100 million transactions in a single day. And I think that shows that token launches on Solana are more than possible. In fact, it's only possible on Solana. And I think you'll see those types of primitives being used to create internet capital markets. So what I'd like to see more of is companies issuing tokens, security tokens on Solana that have, similar access to retail where they can buy, sell, and trade those equities on chain.
Earlier you said Solana is the only chain that could achieve that.
Only possible on Solana.
Okay. Is it your opinion or is it backed by fact?
Well, again, what other chains do you see that have the type of activity as Solana? I think when I think of blockchains, and we're so fortunate and appreciative of Bitcoin, we're huge Bitcoin fans, and of course Ethereum was inspired by Bitcoin, and Solana, of course, was inspired by Ethereum, and so we owe a huge debt of gratitude to all of the incredible technologies and innovations that came before us. But I think the unique thing about Solana is it pairs both scalability and liquidity, and there's only one blockchain in the world that has both of those, and that's Solana.
Okay. You're here for RWA, is that correct?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I think you were talking about DePIN and AI and meme coins and gaming, and Solana is known for so many different things, and we're also known for institutional and RWA, real-world assets. We've got great issuers on the Solana blockchain, from Apollo to Hamilton Lane, Franklin Templeton, startups including Etherfuse tokenizing sovereign bonds, all sorts of real estate, commodities. There's even tokenized uranium on Solana. And so I think that we're going to go further out into the tail. You'll see all assets tokenized on Solana. And that's really, I think, the vision for what we want to be, which is the financial everything store at NASDAQ speed and scale.
Tokenized uranium? Just one second.
Yeah, and here's the craziest part about it.
You can't put that in a nuclear reactor?
No, here's the craziest part about it. They're bringing the lot sizes down. I don't remember the exact number, but you can even take delivery of it. So when you're talking about commodities and things like gold, sometimes when you're purchasing a commodity, you can take deliverable of the underlying, and even with this uranium product, you can take delivery of the underlying.
How does that work?
I'm not sure, but it's pretty cool.
I want to get a little bit technical now. One of the reasons why developers like Solana so much is because of the high throughput and the low gas fees. How does Solana intend to keep both of those things competitive?
Yeah, so the high throughput, one of our rally cries is IBRL, which stands for increased bandwidth, reduced latency. One of the things we say is that our main competitor is physics. We're just trying to make this blockchain as fast as humanly possible. There's a new validator client being released to mainnet soon. In fact, it already has about 3% of stake weight. That's FireDancer, being built by an independent validator client, being built by Jump Crypto. And we'll take throughput on Solana, which is currently around 65,000 to 1 million. So that's huge in terms of scalability.
How long will that take?
It'll be this year, I suspect. On the gas fees, one of the kind of unique things about the Solana blockchain is local fee markets. So on other blockchains, there's this concept of global gas. So if there's a highly congested program or smart contract, people are trying to do something on that blockchain, the gas of the entire blockchain goes up. On Solana, if there's a particular program or smart contract where there's a lot of congestion, you may need to pay a priority fee to have your transaction land for that particular program. But if I want to send you a transaction at the same time, it would still be the base fee on Solana, which is less than a thousandth of a penny.
Earlier, we were talking about tokenizing equity, maybe. What is the timeline?
Yeah.
How long will it take?
It's already happening. I mean, there's so many tokenized equities already on Solana. And I just had breakfast this morning with another company that's got all the licenses, building the technology, has the cap table management, and this is underway. I think the vision of internet capital markets is enabling investors, both issuers and investors, to reach the market in a single venue, of course on Solana, with those super fast blockchain, super low fees, price discovery, and we're already there.
It sounds like the regulation process will take a while.
Well, I think it's very clear that we have a very pro-crypto administration. We'd like to see a stablecoin bill, and we're going to see it soon. We'd like to see a market structure bill. We're going to see it soon. All of this is going to continue to create tailwinds for this industry. But the best part is that there's no longer the headwinds, right? I think we're clearly going in a direction that's positive, and more innovation is possible now in the United States, the greatest country in the world. And I think that will bring everyone else with them. So I'm very bullish.
Stablecoins. Speaking of stablecoins, we haven't talked about stablecoins on Solana. Is that a new development?
Yeah, so one of the metrics that I look at is the number of the total value of stablecoins on Solana, and we recently hit $12 billion of stablecoins on Solana. That's actually doubling from end of year to today. A big part of that was the memecoins that you mentioned, but the incredible thing, even amidst the market conditions that we're in, the stablecoins have not only stayed on Solana, they've continued to grow.
Let's back up a minute. Why would anyone build a stablecoin on Solana in the first place?
Well, as you mentioned, it's the fastest and cheapest blockchain, and money likes to move, right? Money likes to move quickly. Money likes to move cheaply.
Okay.
I talked to somebody yesterday, and he mentioned that he thinks the future of financial system will be built on Ethereum. What is your take on this?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we owe a huge debt of gratitude to Ethereum. The Solana, of course, app chains were all, derivative in some sense or fashion from Ethereum. Ethereum has 7 TPS, 7 throughput per second. I just said we will have 1 million TPS, right? That's a very big difference. And I believe that financial markets want to be able to move very, very fast and very, very cheap. And there's only one blockchain that has both scale and liquidity, and that's Solana.
I've interviewed a lot of people that supports Ethereum recently, so I'll ask you your thoughts on what they said. So they said Ethereum is more decentralized, and they don't like the idea of meme coins launching because that looks like a casino.
Okay, well, let's first address decentralization. Solana has 1,500 validators. We're one of the most decentralized networks in existence. And recently, I think there was a great example of how decentralized we truly are. There was a proposal to change the economic structure of the network to reduce inflation. And Anatoly, the founder of Solana, as well as one of the largest early investors in the Solana ecosystem, a VC fund, one that we have just such a great deal of admiration for, made a proposal in the Solana ecosystem, a governance proposal, and it failed. And I think that is incredible, where you had the founder of the blockchain and one of its largest, earliest, and well-admired investors for that particular governance proposal, and yet it still failed. 70% of the economic value of Solana voted in that governance proposal, and I think it just shows you that's a higher turnout than the US elections, right? I think we're incredibly decentralized and will continue to be more so.
And on the casino comment?
Listen, I think it goes back to the primitives. Memecoins proved that you can do token launches at incredible financial speed and scale on the Solana blockchain, and I think that will inspire other use cases for that type of technology, including institutional RWA.
What would that look like? Because people are talking about RWA, and we know stable coins are on-chain, but then there's real estate, there is equity. Let's take real estate, for example. So I have a hard time imagining how do I even trade real estate on-chain? How do I prove that this token represents this building, for example?
Yeah, so there's all sorts of verification services and ratings agencies on the blockchain. Moody's, S&P, and there's also one called Particula, for example. Well, they will go and analyze and make sure that the smart contracts are all audited and that the underlying collateral or asset is appropriately locked or pointing to the reference token, whether it's an NFT or a fungible token. And you can rely on those. And so I think the maturity of this industry is growing. It's still very early. We're in the top of the first inning, but it's very clear that the direction of travel is more institutional RWA on the blockchain and more institutional RWA on Solana.
First rate cut expected in June. The market's pricing in 2 cuts. Markets aren't pricing in a recession, according to the credit markets. What's your view?
Yeah, so I'm not a macroeconomist, but I think that we're going to see more money supply. I think that governments, want to stimulate the economy. I don't know what the time frame of that is, but I think we're going to see...
Sorry, more money supply?
Yeah, I think we're going to see rates lowered, as you said. I think governments are going to pump liquidity into the market.
You're right. The M2 money, the M2 money supply has been rising. What's that going to do with? What's that going to do to credit markets and equities markets and cryptocurrency markets?
Well, if you look historically, there's generally been a correlation between money supply and cryptocurrencies. Sure. And so I think a rising tide lifts all boats. More liquidity will be great for the ecosystem. But I think the ecosystem is thriving even today. There's lots of folks saying, oh, the market's so terrible. I don't know. From my perspective, the market's incredible. There's more builders on Solana than ever before. There's more users on Solana than ever before. And the growth rate is just absolutely staggering. And so from my perspective, it's a great time to build, and we'll continue to get even better.
One counter argument from the Bitcoin maxis. Bitcoin dominance has been rising all year. 61%, I checked, was the latest number yesterday. The argument is that, yes, rising tide lifts all boats, but that boat is just a big Bitcoin boat.
Yeah, well, in fact, Bitcoiners love Solana, and we're seeing more and more people building tools to bring Bitcoin to Solana. So 21 Shares, Coinbase, others have products to bring Bitcoin onto Solana as collateral or to trade it. You also have projects like Zeus that are trying to allow for Bitcoin DeFi on Solana. So Bitcoin and Solana, I think, are a marriage made in heaven.
Okay, so you're not concerned about a divergence between Bitcoin and, I'm not going to single out Solana, but the altcoins, the rest of the markets stagnating along, and then Bitcoin being the only dominant force?
Bitcoin is nearly a 20-year-old token. It has a very clear market value proposition, which is digital gold. It's something that everyone understands. It, of course, has an ETF. I bet BlackRock's Bitcoin ETF is among the most successful financial products of all time. And so I think Bitcoin is a particularly special digital asset. But a rising tide lifts all boats there too. And so, ultimately, I think the value created by Bitcoin will ultimately be useful as collateral in Solana and make the network even stronger.
One more question from me. Solana ETFs, what does that do for the space?
So CME launched Sol Futures earlier this week. That is typically something that is needed for a Sol ETP or ETF. To be approved. I think there was one even earlier this week. But we really are focused on the technology, and the underlying technology is continuing to improve thanks to technologies like the FireDancer validator client that I mentioned, where Solana will continue to get faster, will continue to get better, will continue to get more useful, and that's the thing that we're really excited about.
It's very interesting you mentioned Zeus, because Justin was on my channel, and you want to talk more about how protocols or companies bring Bitcoin to Solana?
So I think Solana will ultimately be the trading venue for everything. Bitcoin, stocks, bonds, uranium, right? Every asset under the sun will be tokenized, and it will be all tokenized on Solana. And I think folks like Zeus and others who are bringing Bitcoin or any asset onto Solana are doing a really important work and bringing all those assets under one roof where people can trade in a single venue with all of that global liquidity and a great user experience. That's the thing that I think we're so excited to see in the future, and it's coming, very soon.
So the crypto community, they are more impatient, right? They want to know what happens in 3 months, 6 months, or a year. Can you share with you your maybe forecast on what will happen on Solana?
Yeah, on that time frame, I think just the answer is more. And I think on the next time frame, the answer is more. There's more and more and more and more on Solana, and I can't even keep up with it all because it's incredible. It's just, as you mentioned, it's an incredibly decentralized network. It's permissionless. Builders are bringing new products to it every single day. Amazing founders, amazing applications, amazing tokens, and that's what makes Solana so great.
Well, that was great.
Well, that's a wrap, Nick. Thanks for dropping by, and we're all excited about the future of Solana.
Thanks so
Take
much
care.
for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.